You think inheritance is money? Mine was a blueprint for revenge. It started on a church pew during a thunderstorm, after my family locked me out. It started with a note that said, "For who shows up," and a small brass key. By sundown, the richest woman in town would vanish from her own gala. Stay, because the last chair they leave empty is the one that decides everything. My name is Madeline Ross. I am 28 years old, and I have learned to be methodical. I grew up in Maple Ridge, Ohio, a town stitched together by casserole dinners and absolute certainty. In Maple Ridge, Sunday gossip travels faster than sirens. It's a place where everyone knows which curtains are drawn too early and which cars are parked in the wrong driveways. The air here is thick with judgment, humid and heavy, smelling of cut grass and the faint, sweet rot of apples falling in ignored orchards. I am steady. I am the person who checks the circuit breaker before calling the electrician. I am the one who keeps the instruction manuals. My family, however, operates on a different frequency. My parents are Paula and Frank Carver. They are not cruel people. They are, in their way, deeply loving. But their love is a spotlight, and it is aimed perpetually at one person, my younger sister, Sabrina. Sabrina has a glow. It's not just beauty. It's an energy, a frictionless charm that makes people want to give her things. Waiters give her free dessert. Teachers gave her second chances. My parents give her their entire focus. She is the sun, and the rest of us are just planets, existing to mark her orbit in this solar system. I was the helper. It was a role I was assigned early. Maddie, the practical one. Maddie, the one who knows how the router works. Maddie, the helper. It was my job to prep the stage so Sabrina could perform. Maddie, your hands are covered in grease from that bicycle chain. Don't touch Sabrina's costume. Mom would call out, not asking what I was fixing, only that I not stain the star. Our living room mantelpiece is the clearest evidence. It's a long, dark slab of oak, and it is crowded with Sabrina's victories. Silver-plated figure skating trophies, 2 rows deep, tall, glittering pageant crowns on velvet stands, framed ribbons, blue and purple. From equestrian events she tried for one summer. They are dusted weekly. My achievements are in the garage. They are in a damp cardboard box labeled Maddie Misk. Inside, nested between old tax returns and a broken leaf blower, are my robotics medals. My first place plaque from the district science fair. A certificate for a coding competition I won in 10th grade. They do not glitter. They do not get dusted. They are just heavy. Cold metal in the dark. The hurt used to be a sharp, physical thing. Now, it's more like a low-grade fever. The first time I remember truly understanding the hierarchy, the first empty chair memory, was in 8th grade. I had made it to the district robotics finals. I had spent 6 months engineering a hydraulic arm that could sort colored blocks into bins with 98% accuracy. It was clunky, loud, and beautiful. The competition was in the high school gymnasium. The air smelled of floor wax, ozone from the electronics, and popcorn. I had a pit in my stomach, the good kind, the nervous energy before a performance. My parents had promised, front row. I did my presentation. My machine worked flawlessly. The judges, 3 bored-looking engineers from a local plastics plant, actually leaned in. I qualified for the final round. I looked at the bleachers. The 2 seats we'd agreed on, right by the aisle, were empty. I waited. The final round started. I looked again. Still empty. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Mom. Sabrina's recital fitting ran late. Traffic is awful. We won't make it. Break a leg. A fitting, not the performance. A costume fitting. I suddenly felt very cold. I went back to my station. My machine seemed stupid. A pile of wires and pistons. I ran the final program. My hands were shaking, but the machine was steady. It did its job. I won 2nd place, a small, bronze-colored medal. A nice woman whose son competed in the lightweight division, Mrs. Gable, drove me home. She tried to make small talk. I just nodded, the medal heavy in my coat pocket, feeling like a stone. When I got home, The house was buzzing. Sabrina was twirling in the living room in a new sequined leotard. The light from the mantelpiece hit the sequins and threw little stars all over the room. "Look, Maddie," Sabrina called out. "It's for the Stars on Ice Regional next month." "It's lovely," I said. My voice sounded flat, distant. "How was your robot thing?" Dad asked, not looking up from the television. "I got second," I said. "Oh, that's nice, honey," Mom said, smoothing a stray thread on Sabrina's shoulder. "That's real nice. Now, Maddie, be a helper and go start your homework so Frank and I can focus on Sabrina's registration forms. They are a nightmare." I went to my room. I didn't cry. Crying was inefficient. Instead, I took the medal out and put it in my desk drawer. The hurt was there, but it was shifting. It was cooling, hardening into something else, something useful. I learned to turn hurt into skill. If I was invisible, I would become observant. If I was ignored, I would become self-sufficient. I started fixing things for the neighbors. Mrs. Gable's dishwasher had a faulty intake valve. I downloaded the schematic, ordered the part, and fixed it for the cost of the valve itself. The logic of a machine was comforting. It had rules. You followed the schematic. You applied the right tools. And it worked. It was fair. I started volunteering at the St. Augustine's church pantry. Not because I was saintly, but because their inventory system was chaos. Cans of green beans expired in the back, while people took the last box of pasta from the front. I taught myself a basic scripting language on the church's ancient desktop. I built a simple inventory script: check in, check out, first in, first out. It reduced waste by 30%. No one applauded, but it worked. My grandmother, Eleanor Whitcomb, noticed. Eleanor was my mother's mother, but they were nothing alike. Paula was all frantic, bright energy, desperate for social approval. Eleanor was the town's quiet philanthropist, the Whitcomb name etched onto the library wing and the hospital lobby. She was iron-gray hair pulled into a tight bun, sensible shoes, and eyes that missed nothing. She was old money, but not the loud kind. She was the kind that preferred silence, the kind that understood weight. At family dinners, while Sabrina recounted her day with dramatic flourishes, and my parents listened, enraptured, Eleanor would watch me. She always looked longer when I spoke, as if listening was currency and she was weighing every word. One afternoon, I was weeding the church garden, another volunteer task, and she found me. She didn't say hello. She just knelt beside me, her expensive wool coat brushing the dirt, and started pulling dandelions. We worked in silence for several minutes. The only sound was the rustle of weeds and the distant traffic. "The pantry system," she said finally, her voice like dry leaves. "That was you?" "Yes, ma'am. It's efficient. It's just logic," I said. She looked at me, her eyes clear as gray water. "Fairness isn't an accident, Madeline," she said. "It's engineered." That phrase stuck in my head. Engineered. That night, I took out a new journal, not a diary for feelings, but a hardcover black ledger, the kind accountants use. I opened it to the first page and drew 4 columns with a ruler. Date, event, who didn't show, what I built anyway. My first entry was retroactive. Date May 4th, 8th grade. Event District Robotics Finals. Who didn't show Paula Carver? Frank Carver, what I built anyway. A hydraulic lift arm that won 2nd place and taught me how to read a schematic. The ledger grew thick over the years. Date June 10th, sophomore year. Event State Science Fair presentation. Who didn't show Paula? Frank. Sabrina last-minute photo shoot. What I built anyway. A predictive model for local water table contamination. It got me an internship. Date May 19th, senior year. Event valedictorian speech. Who didn't show Mom? Dad left early to get Sabrina to a pageant rehearsal. What I built anyway. A scholarship to Northbridge College. While my ledger filled, Sabrina bloomed. She won Miss Maple County. She got a brand deal with a local boutique, the Gilded Hanger. Her face was on the cover of the Maple Ridge Monitor twice. She was, as the paper called her, Maple Ridge's sweetheart, a perfect, shining product of our town. I got my acceptance letter from Northbridge College. 6 hours away, I had chosen data science. The field seemed right. It was the art of finding patterns in chaos, of making sense of the noise. It was engineering fairness, just like Eleanor said. I told the family at dinner. Sabrina clapped politely. Mom's face tightened. Northbridge Maddie, that's so far. It's a good program, Mom. Frank frowned, putting down his fork. It's far? Think of Sabrina's schedule. Her regionals are coming up. Who is going to help her prep? Who will manage her social media posts? We were counting on you to help with the family enterprise. Sabrina looked down. The perfect picture of reluctant disappointment, the family enterprise, my role as the helper. I think, I said slowly, my voice steady. Sabrina can manage. The argument that followed wasn't loud. It was worse. It was quiet. Suffocating disappointment. I was being selfish. I was being impractical. I wasn't being a team player. I left 3 weeks later. I packed my clothes in a single, secondhand suitcase with a wobbly left wheel. My boxed-up metals stayed in the garage. As I stood on the porch, the humid Ohio air already clinging to me. I looked back through the window. Mom was helping Sabrina try on a new dress. Dad was polishing one of the skating trophies. They were already arranging themselves back into their preferred shape. I turned and walked to my car. I didn't know when I would be back, but as I pulled onto the highway, the ledger sitting on the passenger seat, I made a silent vow. If I couldn't have their applause, I would take proof. Northbridge was a shock of gray stone and anonymity. I vanished into it. My life compressed into a series of repeating loops. The hiss of the radiator in my single dorm room. The scent of old paper and beeswax at my work-study job in the Everwell Library. Shelving books in the history stacks. My fingers tracing bindings from the 1930s. The artificial chicken powder smell of instant ramen. Steam rising into my face at 2 a.m. My textbook propped open against the kettle. I was methodical. I had a budget. I had a schedule. Work-study paid for my meal plan, to pay for books and software. I ran a side gig. A flyer tacked to the student union corkboard, Maddie Ross, laptop repair, fast, cheap. It was cash in hand. Usually $40 or $50 at a time. I got good at it. The tactile satisfaction of prying open a plastic laptop shell without snapping the clips. The tiny, precise click of a new RAM stick seating into its slot. The whir of a fan spinning back to life. I was the helper. Still. But now I was getting paid for it. I was invisible, but I was functional. Then, in my sophomore year, I found my purpose. I landed an analytics internship at the Civic Pulse Lab, a small, non-profit think tank crammed into a basement office off campus. The air was a mix of stale coffee, overheated servers, and the sharp tang of whiteboard markers. My first project wasn't abstract. It was a map of hunger. I was assigned to visualize food desert delivery routes for a network of urban pantries. I spent weeks collating data, bus schedules, census tracts, grocery store inventories, pantry donation lists. The data wasn't just numbers. It was a story of systemic failure. I saw it, clear as a schematic. I saw the bus route that stopped 3 blocks short of the only affordable grocery store, an impossible distance for an elderly person with a walker. I saw the donation peak in December and the severe drop-off in March, just when families' heating bills were highest. I saw the zip codes with the highest rates of child poverty receiving the smallest percentage of fresh produce donations. It was unfair. And it was poorly engineered. I worked past midnight for a month. I didn't just make a map. I built a predictive dashboard. It was clean, interactive, and brutal in its honesty. You could click a zip code and see the deficit in real time. You could see where the system was leaking. It was my first published work. The lab put it on their main website. I was proud. I felt that old familiar ache, the desire to be seen. I emailed the link to the family group chat. Hi everyone, here's the project I've been working on for my internship. I waited. My phone buzzed an hour later. It was Sabrina, a string of 5 heart eye emojis, then a text from Mom. Looks complicated. Honey, great Sabrina is trying a new ring light for her spring makeup tutorial. and the glow is just angelic. Frank is setting it up now. You should see how professional it looks. I stared at the screen. The contrast was so sharp it was almost violent. My dashboard. A complex tool exposing systemic hunger. Their reply. A discussion of cosmetic lighting. I closed the chat. I didn't write it in my physical ledger, which was back in Maple Ridge. I just entered it into the one I kept in my head. The dashboard did get noticed. Just not by my family. It got noticed by Dean Mara Alcott. Dean Alcott taught ethics and algorithms, a senior-level seminar I had petitioned to get into early. She was a terrifyingly intelligent woman with blunt-cut black hair, steel-framed glasses, and a categorical refusal to accept lazy thinking. She did not teach coding. She taught consequences. An algorithm is an opinion embedded in code, she said on the first day, pacing the front of the lecture hall. It is not objective. It is not magic. It is a set of human choices, automated and scaled. Never forget that you are encoding your own biases. Your job is not to be neutral. Your job is to be fair. She was the first person to articulate what I had felt in the church garden with my grandmother. Fairness isn't an accident. It's engineered. She called me into her office after my dashboard went live. Her office was neat, smelled of strong tea, and was lined with books. "Ross," she said, not looking up from her screen as I sat. She was tapping on my dashboard. "This is good work. You found the leaks." "Thank you, Dean." She finally looked at me, her gaze sharp. "But it's reactive. This map shows me where the failure already happened. The food is already gone. The person is already hungry. You're just drawing a map of the damage." I felt a flush of defensiveness, but I kept my mouth shut. "I don't need a historian." "Ross," she said, "I need an engineer. Show me a model that predicts the next supply chain failure. Show me where the leak will happen before the pipe bursts. Can you do that?" She became my compass. She pushed me past simple data entry and into predictive modeling. My senior thesis was born from that conversation. I built a supply chain fairness model. It used predictive analytics to identify bottlenecks in rural resource delivery food, medicine, heating oil based on weather patterns, donor fatigue, and transportation logistics. It was the best, most complex, most important thing I had ever built. I submitted it for the Beacon Fellowship, a national award for civic technology. In April of my senior year, a thick envelope arrived. I had won. It came with a $5,000 grant and an award ceremony in Chicago. This time, I called. I didn't text. I wanted to hear their voices. Dad answered. "Maddie, how's school?" "School's good. Dad, I won something, a national fellowship, for my thesis model." "Oh, that's nice, Maddie," he said. It was that word again. Nice. The same tone he used when I told him I'd fixed the toaster. "That's real nice. Your mother's right here." I heard the phone pass. "Maddie, what's this? You won a thing?" "The Beacon Fellowship, Mom. It's a big deal. There's an awards night in Chicago next month. I'd really like it if you and Dad and Sabrina could come. They pay for the hotel." There was a pause. I heard her exhale, a sound of profound inconvenience. "Oh, honey, Chicago. That's just terrible timing. It's the exact same weekend as the Maple County Strawberry Festival. You know Sabrina is judging the pie-eating contest this year, and she's cutting the opening ribbon with the mayor. We just can't be in two places at once. We're committed. It's just too hectic." The line was quiet. I was looking at the embossed letterhead, Beacon Fellowship, in recognition of outstanding contribution. "I understand," I said. My voice was perfectly calm, perfectly steady. "It sounds very hectic. You should rest well." I hung up before she could reply. I went to Chicago alone. I wore a black dress I'd bought at a consignment shop for $20. I stood on a small stage in a hotel ballroom. I accepted the Crystal Award. I gave a 30-second speech. I didn't look for any familiar faces in the crowd of strangers. I didn't feel hurt. I felt cold. I felt the finality of it. I stopped asking. I started building. The grant money went straight into a dedicated bank account. What I built anyway. I called Grandma Eleanor. I was her only relative who ever called just to check in. Her voice was always like dry leaves, but interested. "A fellowship," she said, when I told her. "Good. A $5,000 grant. What's your next move? Engineer?" "I'm looking at jobs," I said. "Maybe a logistics firm, or a health system." "I see," she said. A week later, she called me. It was a Tuesday evening. I was debugging a piece of code. "Madeline, I have a hypothetical." Her voice was devoid of preamble. "Okay, you have $10,000, cash, and one free Saturday. What do you do with it?" It was such a strange, specific question, but the answer was right there. It had been sitting in my mind for years, an unfinished script. I answered without blinking. I'd audit the town's donation pipelines, all of them, the church pantry, the community food bank, the Whitcomb Foundation's civic grants. I'd cross-reference the stated deliveries with the actual receipts. I'd map the flow of money against the flow of services. I'd find the leaks. "And then," she asked, "then I'd patch them." There was a long silence on the line. It wasn't an angry silence or a confused one. It was a silence that felt like a held breath. "I see," she said at last. I could hear the expression in her voice. It was a small, secret, satisfied smile. "Patch the leaks. You are an engineer. After all. Carry on. Madeline." She hung up. I finished my degree. I graduated with high honors. My 4 years at Northbridge had been a crucible. While I was learning the value of clean metadata, how it tells the truth, how it lasts longer than memory, how it is the ultimate form of proof Sabrina's star was ascending back home. She was no longer just Miss Maple County. She was Maple Ridge's sweetheart, a title bestowed on her by a fawning local TV anchor. Her Instagram was a professional portfolio of curated community engagement. Sabrina at the bake sale. Sabrina visiting the senior center for 10 minutes. The timestamp on the photo proving she'd arrived and left before the lunch service. Sabrina cutting the ribbon for the boutique that sponsored her. She was the face of caring. She was the icon of presence. I was just the one in the library, learning the code that ran beneath the surface. I learned that a clean dataset was a weapon of truth. I also learned, with every unanswered phone call, with every text replied to with an emoji about a hair appointment, the precise, crushing, structural weight of an empty chair. I had the skills, I had the proof, and I was finally ready to go home. Graduation week at Northbridge was a blur of static energy and forwarded emails. My thesis, the predictive model for rural clinics, had been picked up by an academic aggregator. It got a signal boost. Suddenly, Maddie Ross data was trending in a tiny niche corner of academic Twitter. It was a strange, disembodied validation. A producer from a regional news station in Cleveland, a real one, sent me a message. They were doing a segment on the future of Ohio Tech and wanted a 2-minute interview. My capstone presentation, the culmination of my entire college career, was scheduled for that Friday at 10 a.m. This was it. This was the moment that mattered. The one I had built. I sent the formal invitation to the family group chat. My capstone presentation is this Friday at 10. It will be live streamed. Here is the link. I would be very happy if you could watch. I didn't ask them to come. I knew better. I just asked them to watch. The reply came on Thursday night. I was rehearsing my speech. My slides projected onto my blank dorm room wall. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was from Paula. Sabrina's brand launch weekend. "Honey, we're exhausted. Just nonstop. The boutique is bringing in influencers from Columbus. We are all just running on fumes. We will have to catch the replay. Break a leg." I read the message twice. Exhausted. They were exhausted in advance of an event that hadn't happened yet. Exhausted by the sheer importance of Sabrina's glow, I looked at my slide. A complex algorithm that could, with 85% accuracy, predict an impending shortage of antiviral medication in rural counties. I typed my reply. Rest well. I meant it. It was not sarcasm. It was not anger. It was closure. It was the sound of a heavy metal door clicking shut. I turned my phone off and went back to my rehearsal. I aced the presentation. The regional station interview went well. I used the word engineered. I packed my car, my one good suit hanging in the back, my Beacon Fellowship Award wrapped in a towel in my suitcase, and drove home to Maple Ridge. I needed a home base, a quiet place to job hunt. My final round interview for a dream role at Brightline Health Systems was in 10 days. It was a data science position on their global health logistics team. It was the job my entire thesis was built for. I just needed a place to sleep and a good internet connection. I pulled into the driveway just as the sky was turning a bruised, greenish purple. The air was heavy, humid, and still, the kind of stillness that precedes violence. Mom met me at the door, wiping her hands on an apron. "Madeline, you're here. We didn't know when to expect you." "I sent a text this morning," I said, lifting my suitcase. "Oh, it's been a day. Just a day. Sabrina's launch was a triumph. A total triumph." She didn't hug me. She just gestured me inside, her eyes already scanning over my shoulder, as if looking for someone more important. "Go on up," she said. "You know where everything is." I hauled my suitcase up the familiar stairs. The runner was worn in the same places. The faint smell of old carpet and whatever air freshener Mom was using hung in the air. I pushed open the door to my childhood bedroom and stopped. It wasn't my room. The walls, once a pale, neutral blue I had chosen myself, were now painted a bright, offensive millennial pink. My single bed was gone, replaced by a white velvet chaise lounge. My desk, the one I had built my first robot on, was gone. In its place stood a vanity table, ringed with theater-style globe lights. Racks of clothes, most with the tags from the gilded hanger still on them, lined the wall where my bookshelf used to be. The room was filled with tripods, lighting umbrellas, and cardboard boxes of makeup. It smelled of perfume and plastic. "Oh," Mom said, coming up behind me. "I forgot to tell you. Isn't it wonderful? We turned it into Sabrina's content studio." I just stood there. I looked at the wall where my robotics medals, the ones I'd left in the garage, had been replaced by a large, framed poster of Sabrina, professionally lit, laughing at nothing. Where is my stuff?" I asked. My voice was quiet. "Oh, the bed's in the attic. Honey, and your desk. Frank moved it to the garage. We needed the space. Sabrina's brand is a real business now. It's a family enterprise." I set my suitcase down on the plush pink rug. I didn't say anything. I just turned, walked past her, and went down to the garage. The garage was hot and smelled of gasoline and mildew. My old desk was there, shoved against a wall, piled high with empty pageant boxes. My cardboard box labeled Maddie Misk was nowhere to be seen, probably buried. I felt a slow, cold pressure building behind my eyes. I didn't want to fight. I just wanted to sleep. I just wanted to prepare for my interview. The blow-up happened at dinner. It was inevitable. Frank, my father, cornered me while I was making a sandwich. "So, Maddie," he said, leaning against the counter, using his reasonable voice. "This job hunt, your mother tells me you're looking at some big corporate thing. Brightline. It's a good opportunity, Dad." Sure, but it's far, and it's not family. Look, I've been thinking. Sabrina's brand is taking off. She needs someone smart, someone organized, to run the back end. A manager." I stopped spreading the mustard. I looked at him. "She needs you, Maddie," he said, smiling, as if he were offering me a gift. "You're practical. You're good with all that. Computer stuff. You could handle her invoices, her schedule, her web posts. It would be a true family enterprise." The family enterprise, the same words, the same role, the helper. "No," I said. Frank's smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "No." "I mean, no. Thank you. I'm not going to be Sabrina's manager. I'm a data scientist. I have an interview with Brightline." "That's a long shot. Maddie," His voice was rising. That familiar edge of frustration. This is a sure thing. You should be practical. You should be helping your sister. We've all got to pitch in. She's the one with the real shot here, and you're being selfish. I am not her assistant, I said. My voice was shaking, but I held it steady. I am not building her brand. I have built my own career. What career? He snapped. A school project. A piece of paper. Sabrina is making real money. Maddie, real-world success. And you're too proud to help after everything we've done for you. The injustice of it was suffocating. Everything they'd done, every empty chair, every missed event, every trophy on the mantle that wasn't mine. I have to prepare for my interview, I said. I put the knife in the sink. I walked out of the kitchen. Madeline. Don't you walk away from me, we're a family, he shouted. I went up to the content studio and shut the door. I sat on the ridiculous velvet chaise lounge. I opened my laptop. I had a pre-interview call with the Brightline hiring manager at 8 p.m. I had work to do. The storm broke at 7:30. It wasn't a gentle rain. It was a sudden, violent deluge. The sky opened. The first crack of thunder was so loud it shook the house, rattling the windows in their frames. The wind hit next. A high-pitched, freight train shriek at 8:03. In the middle of my video call, the power went out. The house plunged into total, oppressive darkness. The ring lights died. My laptop screen was the only light. My call dropped. Damn it, I whispered. I tethered my laptop to my phone's hotspot, draining its battery. I finished the call. The hiring manager's voice tinny and breaking up over the weak signal. I apologized for the storm, for the connection. I sounded unprofessional. When I hung up, the house was silent, except for the roar of the wind and the lashing rain. My phone battery was at 9%. I felt my way downstairs. The air was hot and sticky. Mom and Dad and Sabrina were in the living room, their faces lit by the blue glow of their phones. The power's out, I said, stating the obvious. We noticed, Sabrina said, not looking up from her screen. My call dropped, I said. My phone's about to die. I can't find the backup batteries. They're somewhere, Mom said vaguely. Frank, where did we put those flashlights? I'll look, I said. I went to the kitchen utility closet. I fumbled in the dark, my hands brushing against old coats and wrapping paper. No flashlights, no batteries. Of course, I needed to recharge my phone and laptop. My interview in the morning was the big one. I had to be prepared. I'm going to run out to the car for a minute, I called into the living room. I need to use the charger. Okay, honey, Mom called back, her voice distracted. Don't get struck by lightning. I grabbed my keys. The front door was heavy. I pulled it open, and the wind ripped it from my hand, slamming it back against the wall. Rain, cold and horizontal, hit my face. Maddie, the door, Dad yelled. I've got it, I yelled back. I wrestled the door shut, turned the deadbolt, and ran through the curtain of water to my car. I sat in the driver's seat, the car shaking in the wind. I started the engine. The dashboard lit up. I plugged in my phone and my laptop. I sat there for an hour, the wipers beating a frantic rhythm, the engine humming, just to get a 40% charge. The rain finally slowed to a steady, hard drumbeat. The wind died down to a moan. I gathered my things, unplugged, and ran back to the house. I got to the front porch, shaking. My clothes soaked through, my hair plastered to my head. I put my key in the lock. It wouldn't turn. I frowned. I tried again. It was solid. I knocked. Mom, Dad, it's me. Nothing. Just the sound of the rain and the faint, muffled sound of the television from a neighbor's house. I knocked again. Harder. Mom, I'm locked out. I hammered on the door. Frank Paula. Open the door. I was getting cold. I walked around the side of the house, peering through the living room window. The blue light from their phones was gone. The room was dark. They had gone to bed. They had locked the deadbolt and gone to bed. I went back to the front door and hammered on it with the flat of my hand until my palm stung. I yelled until my throat was raw. Nothing. I tried to call. My phone, now at a precious 41%, rang and rang. No one picked up. They had, as always, turned their phones to silent. I stood on the porch, shivering. I could break a window. I could go back to the car and sleep, cramped and cold, in the driver's seat, or I still had my key. I walked off the porch, my shoes squelching. The storm had cleared the air, leaving it cold and sharp. The streetlights were still out. The whole town was dark. I walked the 6 blocks to St. Augustine's Church. The old stone building was a black shadow against the clearing sky. I went around to the side entrance, the one for the pantry. My hand was shaking. From cold or anger, I wasn't sure. I slid the old, worn brass key, the pantry volunteer key I'd had since I was 16, into the lock. It clicked. The door opened. I slipped inside. The church was vast and silent. It was not warm, but it was dry. The air smelled of old wood, lemon oil polish, and the faint, sweet scent of rainwater that had seeped into the stone. I walked into the main sanctuary. The only light came from the moon, filtering through the massive stained glass windows. Saints and apostles, rendered in blue and red and gold, looked down on me, their faces serene and judgmental. I was soaked. I was tired. My interview was in the morning. I walked to the front row. I took off my wet jacket, laying it on the stone floor. I found a stack of donation blankets in a wooden chest by the altar, the ones meant for the homeless shelter. I supposed, a version of that tonight. I lay down on the long oak pew. It was hard, unforgiving against my back and hips. I pulled a rough, clean-smelling wool blanket over me. I lay there, staring up at the vaulted ceiling. A black void. I thought about my ledger. Date June 3rd. Event locked out of family home during thunderstorm. Who didn't show Paula? Frank? Sabrina? What I built anyway. A shelter for the night. I closed my eyes. I slept under the gaze of the stained glass saints. I woke to a sound, a soft, heavy creak, the sound of the massive front door of the sanctuary opening. The moon was gone. The windows were gray with the first hint of dawn. It was that cold. Still moment just before the world wakes up. I sat up, my heart pounding, the blanket clutched to my chest. A figure was standing in the center aisle, silhouetted against the gray light. A woman, wearing a trench coat, rain still glistening on the shoulders. She was holding a cane. She was perfectly still, watching me. It was my grandmother, Eleanor Whitcomb. She stood in the center aisle, a silhouette against the flat, gray light of the dawn. I sat up, the rough wool of the donation blanket scratching my neck. My heart was a fist against my ribs. I was cold. I was trespassing, and I had been found. But it was only her, Eleanor Whitcomb. She stood motionless for a long moment. Rain glistened on the shoulders of her dark trench coat. Her iron-gray hair was pulled back, and her eyes, even from 20 feet away, were clear as a verdict. There was no shock in her posture, no pity. It was as if she had simply arrived for a scheduled appointment. She did not scold. She did not ask what I was doing there. She did not ask where my mother was. She simply began to walk toward me, the sound of her cane a soft, deliberate tap on the stone floor. Tap, 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 the sound of a clock measuring out a new, unfamiliar time. I scrambled to my feet, the blanket pooling around my ankles. I was still in yesterday's clothes, damp and wrinkled. I probably smelled like rain and old wood. She stopped at the pew in front of mine. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded note. It was heavy, cream-colored cardstock. She did not hand it to me. She leaned forward and placed it directly on the blanket I had just been sleeping on. I looked down. In her familiar, sharp, old-fashioned cursive, it said, "For who shows up." My throat felt tight. I looked up at her, my voice a dry whisper. "Grandma." She ignored the question. She reached back into the same pocket. She laid 2 items beneath the note, placing them with the same deliberation. A single, heavy, old-fashioned brass key, its teeth complex, and a small slip of paper, torn from a notepad, with a scribbled address, Whitcomb Storage. Unit 12C. Breakfast at 7, she said. Her voice was low, but it carried in the vast, empty silence of the sanctuary. Hearth and kettle diner, come alone. She turned, her movements economical, and began to walk away. The tapping of her cane resumed. Wait, I called out. My voice was stronger now, echoing slightly. I can't. I have an interview. At 9. A video call. She paused at the end of the aisle, near the baptismal font. She did not turn around. Bring the ledger you keep in your head. The heavy oak door creaked, opened, and closed. She was gone. I stood alone in the cold church for a long time. The gray light slowly turned to a weak, watery gold. The stained glass saints above me began to glow, their faces impassive. I looked at the items on the pew. For who shows up? She had known. She must have known I wasn't at the house. But how? My interview. Brightline Health Systems. My escape plan. The job that would get me out of Maple Ridge, away from the pink content studio and the profound, crushing disappointment of my family. It was my future, the one I had engineered. And then there was this, a key, an address, a summons. My hands were shaking, but not from cold. I went to the small bathroom by the pantry, the one I knew so well. I splashed ice-cold water on my face, scrubbing away the grit of the night. I looked at my reflection in the cheap, wavy mirror. My eyes were red. My hair was a mess. I did my best to smooth it down, to straighten my wrinkled clothes. I looked like a stray. I put the key and the note in my pocket. I folded the donation blanket, my hands automatic, and placed it back in the chest. I walked out of the church, locking the side door behind me. The storm had broken completely. The air was scoured clean, sharp and cold. The sun, just cresting the buildings on Main Street, was sudden and intensely bright. It made the wet pavement glitter, made every raindrop on the leaves of the oak trees look like a tiny burning lens. The whole town felt exposed, too bright, as if a protective layer had been blasted away in the night. I walked into the Hearth and Kettle Diner at 6:58. The bell above the door chimed. The air was thick with the smell of old coffee, bacon grease, and bleach. She was already there, in a booth in the far back, facing the door. A mug of black coffee sat untouched in front of her. She was reading a physical copy of the Wall Street Journal. She looked up as I slid into the cracked red vinyl seat. A waitress appeared instantly. Coffee, honey. Please, I said. Black. Eleanor folded her newspaper, not in a rustle, but in two precise, silent movements. She placed it beside her. She did not ask about the church. She did not ask why I was disheveled. You have your interview at 9, she stated. It wasn't a question. Yes, with Brightline Health. A good company. They are doing serious work in logistics. You would do well there. The waitress returned, pouring steaming, bitter coffee into a thick white mug. I wrapped my cold hands around it, letting the heat sink in. Eleanor pushed a thick, legal-sized envelope across the formica table. It was heavy, sealed, and blank. Do not open that yet, she said. I rested my fingertips on it. The paper felt expensive. Grandma, what is this? How did you know I was at the church? She ignored the second question and answered the first. It is a choice, but first, a lesson. She took a slow sip of her coffee. Her gaze was not unkind, but it was absolutely uncompromising. I have watched for decades. Madeline, I watched my daughter, your mother, learn that attention is a resource to be gathered, like firewood. I watched your father learn that volume is a substitute for authority, and I watched you learn to be invisible, to be the helper. My hands tightened on the mug. Your parents, she continued, her voice perfectly even. Love Sabrina. This is a fact. But love without presence is just reputation. It's a performance for the town. It is the new velvet cushions on the pews that Mr. Kell did not ask for. It is a warm, well-lit stage. It is not a chair for you to sit in. Love without presence is reputation. The phrase landed in my chest like a stone. It was the thesis statement for my entire life. It was the title of the ledger in my head. "You were not locked out by accident last night," she said quietly. "It was the inevitable, structural failure of a system they built. You are not an oversight. Madeline, you are an inconvenience to their preferred narrative." I stared into the black surface of my coffee. "I am an old woman," she said, "and I am done with sloppy engineering. I do not like leaks in my systems." She tapped a long, manicured finger on the envelope. "I am offering you a choice, not a gift, not a job, a choice. Inside that envelope is a letter of custodianship. I am asking you to take temporary, immediate, and full control of the Whitcomb Foundation." My head snapped up so fast, I felt a muscle pull in my neck. No, I can't. Paula, Mom helps you manage that." "Paula," she said, and the word was perfectly flat. "Attends the galas. She approves the catering. She does not check the ledgers. I need an engineer. I need the girl who built the pantry inventory script because she hated waste. I need the woman who can see the leaks. I have my interview," I said again, but the words sounded weak, like an excuse. "It's my future. It's my way out." "Yes, it is," she agreed. "It is a very good one. You can walk out of this diner, go back to wherever you are staying, and take that call. You can get that job at Brightline, move to Columbus or Chicago, and build a fine, successful, independent life. I would not blame you for 1 second." She paused, letting the offer hang in the air. "The out. Or," she said, "you can accept the terms." "What terms?" "The terms are simple, but they are immediate. 1, you will postpone your interview with Brightline Health Systems. Today, now, 2. You will take the key that is in your pocket, and you will go to Whitcomb Storage, Unit 12C. You will spend the day inventorying its contents. 3. You will find and interview 3 people before sundown tonight. I have written their names down." She slid another small card across the table. I picked it up. The names were written in her sharp cursive. Mr. Kel Saint, Augustine's janitor, Omar Hassan pantry delivery driver, Lila May retired Whitcomb Foundation bookkeeper. I frowned. These aren't board members. This isn't the foundation's lawyer." "Of course not," Eleanor said, as if I were being dense. "The board sees the summary. Those 3 people are the primary data. They are the ones who do the work. They are the ones who know where the money is supposed to go and where it does not. They are the sensors at the end of the pipeline. And after I do all this, after I talk to a janitor and a retired bookkeeper, after you have reviewed the data in the unit and spoken to those 3 people, you will decide, officially, whether to accept the custodianship outlined in that envelope. If you accept," she leaned in, her voice dropping, "you must agree to one final, binding clause. You must not, under any circumstances, tell your parents or your sister for 14 days, not one word. You will proceed in silence." 14 days, a ticking clock. "Why?" I asked. "Why silence?" "Because this is a test, Madeline." Her eyes held mine. "But it is not a test for you. Some tests aren't about passing, they're about revealing." I looked at her, the woman who had found me weeding a garden and given me my life's philosophy, the woman who had asked what I would do with $10,000, the woman who had shown up in a dark church at dawn. The ledger in my head was open. Date June 4th, event breakfast at the Hearth Kettle. Who showed up? Eleanor Whitcomb. What I built anyway. A choice, my interview, my escape plan, my quiet, safe, distant future, and this, the key, the envelope, the names. It wasn't an escape, it was a schematic for structural repair. It was a blueprint. My hands were perfectly steady. It was 7:35 a.m. I picked up my phone. I opened my email. I found the thread with the Brightline hiring manager. I typed a short, precise message. "Dear Ms. Alvarez, An urgent and unforeseen family matter has come up. I must respectfully request to postpone today's interview. I remain deeply interested in the position and hope we can find a time to reschedule in the near future. Sincerely, Madeline Ross. I hit send. I turned my phone face down on the table. I looked up at Eleanor Whitcomb. "Tell me where to find Lila May," I said. A smile, small as a secret, touched the corners of her mouth. "She walks her dog in the park at 9. I picked up the heavy legal envelope and slid it into my damp jacket pocket. It rested against the cold brass key. I drank the rest of my coffee. It was bitter, but it tasted like fuel. We paid at the register, in cash. We walked out onto the sidewalk. The sun was high enough now to be warm, burning off the last of the rain. The brightness was relentless. The town looked naked. Every crack in the pavement, every faded advertisement, every bit of trash in the gutter, perfectly, painfully clear. Eleanor stopped and tapped her cane once on the concrete. "The storage unit is 3 blocks north. Good luck, engineer." She turned and walked toward the town square, leaving me alone on the sidewalk. The weight of the key in my pocket, the town waiting, too bright and silent, around me. Whitcomb's storage was a row of glaring white, roll-up metal doors baking in the mid-morning sun. It smelled of hot asphalt and dust. Unit 12C was at the far end. Away from the office, the brass key, heavy and cold from my pocket, felt oversized for the modern, rusted padlock. It wasn't. It fit the padlock. It was Eleanor's lock. The key turned with a well-oiled, satisfying click. I braced myself and hauled the corrugated metal door up. It shrieked in protest, the sound echoing in the empty corridor. The air that rolled out was not the musty scent of mothballs and old furniture. It was dry, sharp, and smelled overwhelmingly of old paper and ink. Unit 12C was not for antiques. It was an archive. It was not a room. It was a library of finance, 10 feet deep, 10 feet wide, and stacked to the ceiling with uniform, gray archival boxes. Every box was neatly labeled in Eleanor's cursive. In the center of the unit sat a single metal desk and a folding chair. On the desk, a battery-powered lantern, a stack of legal pads, and a box of binder clips. She had prepared this. I turned on the lantern. Its cold LED light illuminated the wall of boxes. This was 20 years of civic money flow. Ledgers, scanned receipts, bank statements, donor lists, board minutes, grant proposals. I pulled a box from the middle. Whitcomb Foundation. Disbursements 2018-2020. Inside, the files were immaculate, organized by quarter, and they were tabbed. I saw the color-coded tabs, bright against the manila folders, all in Eleanor's neat hand. Town Council, Food Bank, St. Augustine's Roof Fund, Clinic Transport. Then I saw the other tabs, Carver Family Trust, and my in a box labeled Community Outreach. A bright pink tab, Sabrina PR. My blood went cold. Sabrina PR. Why was my sister's publicity? Her brand. A line item in a charitable foundation's records. This wasn't a family album. This was a vault. I looked at my watch. 8:45. I left the unit, pulling the door down but not locking it, and walked to the park. Mrs. Lila May was exactly where Eleanor said she would be. Sitting on a bench near the fountain, a small, nervous terrier panting at her feet. She was a bird-like woman with sharp eyes behind thick glasses. She had been the foundation's bookkeeper for 40 years before retiring 2 years ago. "Mrs. May?" I asked. She looked up at me, and her expression was not one of surprise. It was one of profound, weary relief. "You must be Madeline," she said, patting the bench. "Eleanor said you might come. She asked me to speak with you about the foundation." Lila May looked down at her hands, clasped tightly in her lap. "I love that foundation. I built its systems. Clean books. Madeline. Always clean books. Until Eleanor had her stroke. That was, 5 years ago." "About that," I said. "She was out of commission for 3 months. That's when your mother stepped in. Just to help," she said. loading the word with a weight I was beginning to understand. To manage community grants as a favor, to lighten Eleanor's load. Paula has such energy. The board loved her. She made everything sound so exciting. What did she do? She introduced new vendors, Lila May said, her voice dropping. New categories, community morale, civic image enhancement. I would ask for the invoices, and they were vague. Promotional services, event coordination. When I tried to flag them, to match them against the grant charters, your mother just smiled at me. She said I was old-fashioned and that modern philanthropy was about building a brand for the town. She said it was all to make Maple Ridge look good, which would attract more donors. She said Eleanor had approved the new direction. And had she? Lila May shook her head. Eleanor was still in recovery. By the time she was back at her desk, Paula had routed all community outreach funds through a new subcommittee, a committee that she chaired. I couldn't get the primary invoices anymore, just a summary report from Paula's committee. It broke my heart. I retired 6 months later. Attention buys access. I thanked her and walked back to the storage unit, the bright sunshine feeling abrasive against my skin. I grabbed my laptop from my car. I sat at the metal desk in the cold, paper-scented air of Unit 12C. I opened the box labeled Community Outreach 2021. Present. I found the Sabrina PR file. It wasn't just press clippings, it was invoices. Invoices from the Gilded Hanger for promotional wardrobe, invoices from a graphic design firm for social media assets, invoices from a catering company for a brand launch party, all paid for by the Whitcomb Foundation's community morale budget. I pulled out the ledgers. I saw the donations coming in large checks from local businesses, smaller ones from families earmarked for community support or pantry fund. Then I saw the transfers out. I opened my analytics software. I didn't need to do a deep dive. The leak was not a trickle, it was a fire hose. I ran a simple script, just a quick cross-reference of vendor addresses and incorporation filings. I found it in under 10 minutes, a series of donations, routed from the foundation to something called Maple Ridge Event Services, LLC. The payments were for civic planning and promotional coordination. I ran the LLC's address. It wasn't an office building. It was a mailbox at a UPS store. The same mailbox number registered to Sabrina's talent agent, the one who handled her boutique deals. It was a round trip. Money left the charity, passed through a shell company disguised as an event planner, and was likely dispersed to vendors, and perhaps the agent himself to pay for Sabrina's brand. My family's enterprise. I packed up my laptop, my hands shaking. My next stop was the pantry, back at St. Augustine's. I found Omar Hassan in the loading dock, wrestling with a broken pallet jack. He was sweaty, stressed, and his shirt was stained. He looked at me and sighed. "If you're here to drop off, it's gotta be cans," he said, not stopping his work. "We're full up on bread." "Omar, I'm Madeline Ross, Eleanor Whitcomb's granddaughter. I used to volunteer here. I built the first inventory script." He stopped. He wiped his forehead with his arm, leaving a streak of grime. "Ross, right, the computer girl. Hell of a time to visit. We're getting killed." "What do you mean?" "I mean, look." He gestured to the half-empty shelves inside. "Our demand is up 30% since the mill closed, but our supplies are down. We can't get the food out." "Is it a donation issue?" He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "It's a fuel issue. We used to get a monthly grant from the Whitcomb Foundation, a dedicated fuel voucher program. It paid for the gas for our 2 delivery vans. It was the only way we could service the rural routes and the shut-ins. Used to. It got slashed, about 2 years ago, just cut in half, with no warning, the same month." He kicked the pallet jack. "That all those Carver events started popping up on Instagram, all those parties, all that Maple Ridge sweetheart crap. We had to cut all our rural deliveries. We just don't have the gas. The need is there. The food is mostly here, but I can't get it to them. Sabrina's launch parties, Omar's fuel vouchers. My last stop was Mr. Kell, the janitor. I found him in the sanctuary, mopping the stone floor. The church was empty, shafts of afternoon light cutting through the dust. It smelled of lemon oil and wax. He was an older man with a gentle face and the stooped shoulders of someone who has been cleaning up after other people for a very long time. Mr. Kell. Yes, ma'am. I'm Madeline Ross. I was in here last night. His eyes widened slightly, then softened. Ah. Yes, I found your jacket. You left it on the floor. He pointed to the narthex. I hung it up for you. I hope your situation has improved. It's complicated, I said. Mr. Kell, Eleanor Whitcomb asked me to talk to you about these pews. I ran my hand along the top of the oak pew. The cushion, a rich plush velvet in a deep burgundy, was still practically new. He sighed, leaning on his mop. Oh, that was Mrs. Carver, your mother. What about them? Well, he said, choosing his words carefully. We needed new mops, desperately. The budget for custodial supplies is thin, and the roof over the pantry leaks every time we get a storm like last night's. I put in a request with the church board. We applied for a Whitcomb Goodwill grant, for the roof and the supplies. Simple stuff. What happened? Your mother, Mrs. Carver, she came to a board meeting. She said the pantry roof wasn't a donor-facing project. She said what the church really needed to show community luxury and encourage donations was new pew cushions, top-tier velvet, she specified. She said it would improve the church's brand. The board. Well, they listened to her. She's Eleanor's daughter. She pushed the order through herself. And the grant? It was approved, Mr. Kell said, his voice flat. The entire grant. But it wasn't for the roof. It was for these top-tier velvet, charged directly to the Whitcomb Goodwill line item. I still have the invoice. I kept it. He looked at the cushion. They're very comfortable, he said softly, but my mops are falling apart, and the pantry floor is wet again. I sat on the velvet pew, the pew I had slept on, the cushion that had been bought with money meant for a roof, with money meant for mops. Attention buys access. Paula had used her social standing and her daughter's manufactured fame to gain access to the foundation's controls. Access bleeds budgets. And she had bled them dry, replacing fuel with fireworks, replacing a dry roof with velvet, all to build a stage for Sabrina. I drove back to the storage unit. The sun was low, casting long, sharp shadows. I sat at the metal desk in the cold silence, my charts, my notes. The interviews, they bloomed into a single, ugly, undeniable pattern. It was time. I pulled the heavy legal envelope from my pocket. My hands were perfectly steady. I broke the seal. Inside, there was a multi-page document, a letter of custodianship. It was exactly what she said it would be. It named Madeline Ross as interim steward of the Whitcomb Foundation for a period of 30 days, effective immediately upon acceptance. It granted me full signatory power, full access to all accounts, and full authority to conduct a complete audit. At the bottom of the last page, there was a handwritten addendum in Eleanor's sharp, familiar ink. If you build a table, don't forget chairs for those still standing. I thought of the empty chair at my robotics final. I thought of the empty chair at my graduation. I thought of the empty chairs at the pantry, waiting for deliveries that Omar couldn't make. I took a pen from the desk. I signed my name on the signature line. I was trembling, but it was not from fear. It was not from anger. It was from alignment. It was the feeling of 1,000 loose, broken parts finally clicking into a single, functioning, powerful machine. The machine I was born to build. Day 1 as custodian began in the sterile, paper-scented air of Unit 12C. My signature on that document was an act of severance. The Madeline who was waiting for an apology, the one who just wanted a seat at the table, was gone. In her place was the engineer. I did not leave. I drove to the 24-hour office supply store at the highway junction, bought a high-speed portable scanner and 3 external hard drives. I returned to the storage unit, pulled the metal door shut, and locked it from the inside, plunging the room into the cold, bright pool of the lantern's light. For the next 8 hours, I worked. It was a methodical disassembly. I scanned every ledger, every bank statement, every grant proposal, every invoice from the Gilded Hanger, every line item for community morale, every memo from my mother, Paula, suggesting new funding priorities. I digitized the receipts for the velvet pew cushions and the corresponding budget request from Mr. Kell for a roof repair that was denied. I captured the entire, meticulous, 20-year history. I saved it, not on any cloud, not on any network. I saved it onto one encrypted drive. I used a 256-bit AES encryption key. I labeled the drive. The volume name a simple, Stark. All caps declaration, who shows up. I backed that drive up onto the other two. One went into my pocket, one I would mail to a secure address Dean Alcott kept. The originals went back into their archival boxes. I put everything back exactly as I found it. I left the storage unit, pulling the door shut. The heavy click of Eleanor's padlock was the sound of a vault closing. The data was mine. Day 2, 9 a.m. I walked into the offices of Riddick Associates. The firm was on the second floor of the town's oldest brick building. It smelled of old leather, floor wax, and strong, percolated coffee. Attorney Jasper Riddick was exactly what I expected. He was a man in his late 60s with a perfectly neat gray mustache, a tweed jacket that looked expensive 30 years ago, and eyes that seemed to be perpetually amused. He was Eleanor's estate lawyer. He was a man who, I suspected, loved precise commas and unbreakable clauses. I sat. Madeline Ross, I signed the custodianship letter yesterday. I know, he said, his voice dry as old paper. Ms. Whitcomb informed me you were activated. Welcome to the board. Ms. Ross. Coffee. No, thank you. I need to know the full legal standing, the charter, the bylaws, and the mechanism of the trust. Jasper Riddick steepled his fingers. He looked, for a moment, like a disappointed professor. Most people start by asking how much money there is. You start by asking about the mechanism. You are Eleanor's granddaughter. All right. He slid a thick, leather-bound binder across his mahogany desk. Eleanor is an engineer, Ms. Ross, as are you, I'm told. Her living trust is not a bucket of money. It is a machine. It is designed to function with precision, and it runs on a very specific, non-negotiable fuel presence. Presence, physical presence, he clarified. It is built around what we call the show-up provision. It is the spine of the entire trust and the foundation it funds. He opened the binder. It is elegant, really. Funds, grants, stipends, and discretionary distributions do not flow to beneficiaries by default. They are not an inheritance. They are wages. They flow only to those who physically attend and serve specified community milestones. The quarterly pantry inventory, the town hall budget review, the church groundskeeping committee, the clinic volunteer shift. If you are not physically there, your share, or your organization's grant, is rerouted to the general community pool for that quarter. I felt the alignment again, that cold, satisfying click. If you don't show up, I whispered, you don't get paid. Love without presence is reputation, Riddick quoted, and reputation doesn't sign the checks, which brings us, he turned a page, to the Carver Family Trust. He tapped a subclause. This is your clock. Ms. Ross, the family distributions your mother's, your father's, your sister's are tied to a specific addendum, an accountability mandate. It stipulates that in the event a new steward is activated, as you have been, a public transparency event must be held. This event must detail the Foundation's recent expenditures and community impact. Within 14 days of your acceptance, he said, that gives you 13 days left. And here, he tapped the final paragraph, is the kill stroke. I leaned in. Attendance by all primary beneficiaries of the Carver Family Trust, that is, Paula, Frank, and Sabrina, is mandatory. It is listed as a primary community milestone. If they do not physically attend this public review, their access to all trust funds, stipends, and associated assets is immediately frozen, pending a full independent audit and a complete mandatory restitution process for any discrepancies you may have uncovered. I stared at the clause. It was a bear trap, built of paper and ink, waiting patiently in the woods. Eleanor didn't just give you a ledger, Ms. Ross, Riddick said, a flicker of that dry wit in his eyes. She gave you a chessboard and the right to make the opening move. I left his office with the binder. I had the data. I had the legal mechanism. I had a 14-day clock. I didn't go back to my parents' house, to the Pink Content studio. I checked into the only motel in town, the Maple Ridge Inn, a grim, concrete block building by the highway. I paid cash. I sat on the lumpy bed, my laptop open, and began to build the weapon. This wouldn't be my complex academic model. This had to be simple, brutal, honest. I was building a community dashboard, the one I had described to Eleanor. The interface was clean, white, and stark. The title was simple: Open Books Where the Money Actually Went. I didn't use spreadsheets. I used icons. I created a module for the pantry fund. A bar graph showed the donations coming in, earmarked for food delivery, then an arrow, pointing to two icons, a loaf of bread, and a red fuel can. I used the data from Omar. I showed the fuel can icon shrinking by 60%. The money was diverted. Where did it go? It went to a new module, Community Morale. The icon for that module was a champagne glass and a string of party lights. I created a module for Community Goodwill. I displayed Mr. Kell's original request, a simple icon of roof shingles. I showed it stamped Denied beside it, an approved request for the same amount. The icon was a swatch of burgundy velvet. The data from the Sabrina PR file was the centerpiece. I showed the invoices from the Gilded Hanger and the Event Services LLC, the one with the UPS store mailbox. I showed the flow of money, a round trip from the charity to the shell company. It wasn't an accusation. It was just math. It was a schematic of a broken machine. Day 4, it was time to populate the dashboard with verified, real-time responses. I logged into the Foundation's primary email. I drafted a quiet, formal notice. My new signature was at the bottom: Madeline Ross, Interim Steward, Whitcomb Foundation. The email was simple: to all vendors and recipients of Whitcomb Foundation Funds 2020, present as part of a mandatory systems audit, please verify service delivered for the attached list of amounts received. We require itemized receipts by end of day, Friday, to ensure uninterrupted future funding. I sent it to Omar at the pantry. I sent it to Mr. Kell at the church. I sent it to the clinic, and I sent it to the entire list of morale vendors, the Gilded Hanger, the caterers, the graphic designer, the Maple Ridge Event Services, LLC. The replies from the real organizations were immediate. Omar replied in 10 minutes. Verified, and thank God someone is finally asking. See attached fuel logs. Mr. Kell replied, verified. Service was pew cushions, velvet, as ordered by P. Carver. The reply from the Gilded Hanger came 3 hours later. It was not calm. It was hostile, defensive, and panicked. This is highly irregular. Our arrangement is with Paula Carver, not with you. All services were rendered as community branding, and the accounts are settled. We will not be providing itemized receipts for past work. This is harassment. And then, the fatal, beautiful mistake, the one panicked people always make, accidentally, fatally, CC'd on the hostile reply Paula Carver Gmail. Com. My mother was now alerted. The board was lit. The pieces were moving. I had to set the trap. I went to the town clerk's office. I booked the Maple Ridge Civic Hall, not the church, neutral ground. I booked it for 10 days from now. Day 13. The title, Open Books Night, a Whitcomb Foundation Transparency Report. I sent the reservation confirmation to Riddick. He would handle the formal, legal notification to the beneficiaries Paula, Frank, and Sabrina. Their attendance was now legally compelled, unless they wanted to forfeit everything. I sat in my motel room, my laptop chimed, an email. It was from Brightline Health Systems. Dear Ms. Ross, we were sorry to hear of your family matter. We were very impressed with your first round. We have an opening for a final technical interview with the logistics team. The only slot we have available is... I read the date. It was the morning of day 13, the same day as the open books night. It was a test. My old life, the escape, my new life, the fight. Could I be both? The engineer at the keyboard and the custodian on the stage. I typed my reply. That time works perfectly. I look forward to it. Sincerely, Madeline Ross. Risk accepted. I needed one more review. I scheduled a video call with Dean Alcott. I shared my screen. I showed her the dashboard, the fuel cans, the velvet, the round-trip arrows. She was silent for a full minute, her face sharp and clear on my screen. This is surgical. Madeline, she said finally. It is all so devastating. They will try to make this about you. They will call you cold, vengeful, an ungrateful child. You cannot let them. You must keep it human. What do you mean? I asked. The data is the truth. Data is the scalpel. Madeline, not the cure, she said, her voice firm. You are not there to punish. You are there to re-engineer fairness. Don't just show them the icons. Show them who the icons represent. Show them Omar's routes. Show them the families he can't reach. Show them Mr. Kell's leaky roof. The data is your proof, but the impact is your story. That is your shield. After we hung up, I walked to the small print shop on Main Street, the one that did wedding invitations and business cards. I need 3 place cards, please, I told the woman at the counter. Heavy cream stock, folded, black, simple script. I wrote the text down on a slip of paper. First card, Eleanor Whitcomb. Second card, community seats. Third card, reserved for who shows up. The official notice, posted on the Civic Hall's website and in the Maple Ridge Monitor, was dry. It spoke of audits and transparency. The unofficial notice, however, spread like a gasoline fire. It started in the Maple Ridge Moms Facebook group, a private forum where my mother, Paula, had reigned as a compassionate administrator for years. The narrative spun out fast, a sticky web of curated concern. Does anyone know what's really going on with the Whitcomb Foundation hearing some very ugly, ungrateful rumors? Paula Carver has given her life to this town. It's just sickening what some people will do for attention. Someone said Eleanor is being manipulated. She's so frail. This is elder abuse, plain and simple. It's the quiet one, the one who went away to college, Madeline. Always thought she was a bit cold. Now she's back, trying to hijack her own family's charity. Shameful. The digital world was a pressure cooker, and my name was the steam. I had been in Maple Ridge for less than 2 weeks, and I had already been tried and convicted by a jury of women in yoga pants who traded in casserole recipes and character assassination. The real world was no better. I ran into my father at the grocery store. I was in the produce aisle, checking my list coffee, protein bars, apples, the motel diet. He didn't see me at first. He was near the checkout, laughing with someone. Then he turned, and his face froze. He abandoned his cart and marched over. His face flushed red under the fluorescent lights. The store smelled of wet cilantro and floor wax. "Madeline," he said, his voice a low, furious hiss. He grabbed my elbow. "What in God's name do you think you're doing?" "I'm buying groceries, Dad." "Do not be smart with me. This meeting, this event, you are making us look bad. You are airing our laundry in the street. You are humiliating your mother. You are embarrassing your sister." I looked at him. His anger was genuine, but it was the anger of a man whose favorite show had been interrupted. It was the indignation of inconvenience. "You're making us look bad," he repeated, squeezing my arm. "Call it off, whatever little game this is. It's over. I carefully removed his hand from my elbow. I put a bag of apples in my cart. I'm not airing your laundry, Dad, I said, my voice perfectly even, audible only to him. I'm showing the books. There's a difference. You. He was speechless, his mouth opening and closing. He was not used to a no that wasn't followed by an apology. I pushed my cart past him. I have to go. I have work to do. Sabrina's response was, as always, both passive and public. She posted an Instagram story. It was a video, filmed in the pink content studio that used to be my bedroom. She was in perfect, soft-focus lighting, a single, artful tear rolling down her cheek. There was no sound, just sad, orchestral music. The text was overlaid in a delicate, scrolling font. It's so hard when you build something beautiful and people who were never there try to tear it down. Some people just hate success. Sending love to all my supporters. Your light keeps me going. My phone, which I had foolishly left on, lit up. My inbox, which I had never given out, was suddenly flooded. Sabrina's followers, her supporters, had found me. Vengeful bitch. Jealous. C-word. Why do you hate your sister? You're just ugly. Your mom should have swallowed. I blocked. I reported. I disabled direct messages. I sat on the lumpy polyester comforter of my motel bed and watched the vitriol pour in, a digital avalanche of performative loyalty. My phone buzzed again, a text from a number I knew by heart. Eleanor. Proceed. Engineer. 2 words. It was an anchor. It cut through the noise, the gossip, the curated tears. It was a command. The morning of day 13 was bright and cold. At 9 a.m., I sat at the motel's wobbly desk, my good suit jacket on over a plain blouse, and nailed my final interview with Brightline Health Systems. I walked the technical team through my thesis model. I answered their logic puzzles. I reverse-engineered their hypothetical supply chain failures. It was clean. It was math. It was sane. This is some of the most impressive work we've seen. Ms. Ross, the team lead said. We'll be in touch. Soon. I logged off at 10:30. I closed the laptop. I had done it. I had built my escape. Now I had to walk into the fire. I spent the afternoon at the Civic Hall. It was an old, cavernous room with a high ceiling, a wooden stage, and the lingering smell of decades of pancake breakfasts and stale coffee. The acoustics were terrible. My footsteps echoed as I walked to the podium. I tested the microphone. Check, check, 1, 2, my voice came back at me, thin and loud. I connected my laptop to the projector. I focused the lens. A clean white slide filled the large screen above the stage. In stark, black, sans serif font, where the money actually went. I ran through the presentation, my voice echoing in the empty hall of 500 chairs. I practiced the transitions. Click, Omar's fuel budget, shrinking. Click, the champagne glass icon, growing. Click, Mr. Kell's denied roof shingles. Click, the approved velvet cushions. Click, the round trip, a perfect damning circle. From the foundation, to the LLC, to the boutique's invoices. I kept my voice flat, calm, and methodical. I followed Dean Alcott's advice. I was not the victim. I was not the angry daughter. I was the engineer. Pointing to the leak, I was the surgeon, holding the scalpel. At 5 p.m., the pantry volunteers arrived. It was Mrs. Gable, the woman who had driven me home from my robotics final, and 2 others I recognized. They were carrying not picket signs, but 2 large cardboard boxes. We heard this was happening, Mrs. Gable said, her mouth set in a thin, determined line. We're not sure what you're doing, Maddie, but we know you, and we know the pantry's books, so we brought cookies. They began setting up a table in the back, chocolate chip, oatmeal raisin. We figured, she said, people listen better when they're not hungry. I smiled. It was the first real smile in days. I found a piece of paper and a marker and made a small sign for their table, no budget required. At 6:15, as the volunteers were pouring coffee into paper cups, A man in a crisp uniform walked in. A courier. He held a legal envelope. Madeline Ross. "That's me," I signed. I opened it. It was an emergency notice from the Whitcomb Foundation Board, or rather, the subcommittee my mother chaired. It was a petition, filed that afternoon, to suspend the event. It cited irregular stewardship, potential defamation, and concern for the foundation's public image. It was a last-ditch effort to shut me down, to cut the microphone. My heart hammered. I called Jasper Riddick. "I got it," I said, my voice tight. "Relax, Ms. Ross." His dry voice crackled over the line. "It's handled. I filed our reply 1 hour ago. You can't petition to suspend a meeting you are legally required to attend. The show-up provision. Remember, I informed the board that any suspension request or challenge to your stewardship must be made by the challengers, in person, on the floor of the Civic Hall tonight. Otherwise, the challenge is void, and their absence is noted as a forfeiture. Checkmate." I let out a breath I had been holding for my entire life. They couldn't stop it. They could only run from it. At 6:45, I walked to the front row. The room was still empty. I placed the 3 folded place cards on the 3 center seats. Eleanor Whitcomb, community seats. On the third one, reserved for who shows up, I placed 2 small objects I had brought from the motel, a single, perfect, white tulip, which I had bought at the grocery store, and a standard, silver paperclip, a small, simple, perfect piece of engineering, designed to hold things together. At 6:50, the doors opened, and people filed in. They were not just the Facebook moms. I saw Mr. Kell, the janitor, in his Sunday suit, take a seat in the back. I saw Omar, the pantry driver, his arms crossed, standing against the wall with 2 other drivers. I saw Lila May, the retired bookkeeper, sit in the 3rd row, her hands folded in her lap. The room filled. The whispers were a low hum. The curious, the angry, the confused, the board members, my mother's committee, sat in a tight, hostile knot near the side, and in the back, a man from the local TV station raised a camera to his shoulder. A single, red light began to blink, an unblinking eye. The front row remained empty. It was 7:01. It was time. My phone, sitting on the podium, buzzed. I looked at it. A text from Paula. "We're too tired from Sabrina's media day. Honey, this is all too much drama. We will sort it out another time. We're exhausted. Another time. The story of my life. The fitting. The photo shoot. The strawberry festival. The exhaustion. The empty chairs. Over and over and over. I looked at the text. I felt a profound, cold calm. I typed my reply. Rest well. I hit send. I turned the phone over. Face down on the wooden podium. I silenced it. The connection was cut. I looked up at the crowd, at the blinking red light. I tapped the microphone. It whined, then settled. "Good evening," I said. My voice, clear and steady, filled the room. I stood behind the podium. The solid oak felt cool under my palms. The bright white slide, with its stark black title, "Where the Money Actually Went," glowed on the large screen behind me, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The hall was full. The silence was not polite. It was predatory. It was the silence of a town waiting to pass judgment. I saw the local news camera, its red light a single, unblinking eye. I saw my mother's committee members, huddled together, their faces tight with resentment. I saw Mrs. Gable and the pantry volunteers in the back, a silent, moral ballast. "Good evening," I said again, my voice amplified, filling the room. "My name is Madeline Ross. As interim steward of the Whitcomb Foundation, I am here, as required by the Foundation's charter, to present a community transparency report, an audit." I let the word audit hang in the air. "I am a data scientist," I continued, my voice steady, the one I used for my thesis defense. "But I don't want to start with charts. I want to start with stories. I want to start with a story about gasoline." I looked over the heads of the crowd, to the back wall where Omar stood, his arms crossed. For years, the Whitcomb Foundation funded a fuel voucher program for the St. Augustine's Pantry. It paid for the gas for their 2 delivery vans. It was the only way they could reach the elderly, the shut-ins, and the families in the rural tracts. 2 years ago, that fuel budget was cut by over 60%. The need didn't go away. The lines just got longer. Because the pantry's access was cut off. I paused. I also spoke with Mr. Kell, the church janitor, last year. He filed a grant request for an urgent need to repair a leak in the pantry roof that floods the floor every time we have a storm. That request was denied. He was informed, and I quote, that it was not a donor-facing project. Whispers bloomed in the quiet, like static. The committee members stared at their laps. This is a story about choices, I said. A choice to cut a fuel budget for the hungry, a choice to deny a roof repair, and then a choice of what to fund instead. Because while those needs were denied, a new budget line appeared in the Foundation's ledgers, Community Morale, and that budget was used to fund gala fireworks, professional media kits, and, according to the invoices, top-tier velvet pew cushions for the sanctuary. This was the pivot. I clicked the remote in my hand. The projector screen changed from the title slide to the dashboard interface. The room, which had been leaning back in judgment, now leaned forward in unison. This, I said, is the dashboard I built from the Foundation's own records. The data is not mine. It belongs to the community. It shows us where the money actually went. I used the laser pointer, a small, sharp red dot on the screen. Here, the pantry fund. You can see the deposits, earmarked for community support. And here, you see the transfer, 60%, diverted to this new budget. I clicked. The Community Morale Fund, and this fund paid these vendors. The names appeared. Premier Catering, The Gilded Hanger, Apex Graphic Design. And this one, I said, the red dot resting on the final name. Repeatedly, Maple Ridge Event Services, LLC. I let the name hang in the air. I am an engineer. I look for patterns. I was curious about Maple Ridge Event Services, LLC. The payments to this vendor totaled over $50,000 in just 18 months for promotional coordination and event planning. I clicked again. The screen split. On one side, the LLC's incorporation filing. On the other, a public business registry. It turns out, I said, my voice flat, that Maple Ridge Event Services, LLC, is not an office. It is a private mailbox at the UPS store on the highway. It is the same mailbox number registered to the consulting LLC of my mother, Paula Carver, and the talent agent for my sister, Sabrina. A gasp, not a whisper, but a single, sharp intake of breath from the entire room. The news camera, I saw from the corner of my eye, was steady. Its red light burned. But let us return, I said, to the velvet cushions, the ones that were approved while the pantry roof was denied. I clicked the remote. The dashboard vanished, replaced by a video. The quality was bright, professionally lit, and horribly familiar. It was an Instagram reel, screen captured from Sabrina's account before it had been quietly deleted 2 days ago. Sabrina's face filled the screen. She was sitting on the pew in the church, stroking the rich burgundy velvet. The light from the stained glass windows hit her like a spotlight, a manufactured halo. "Hi, everyone," her voice, bright and frictionless, echoed through the civic hall. "I'm just so proud of the work my mom and I are doing with the foundation. We believe that community luxury is a right. People deserve to feel good about where they live. That's why we insisted on funding these gorgeous velvet cushions for St. Augustine's. It's about upgrading our town's brand. It's the kind of luxury our community deserves." The video ended. The screen went black for a moment, then returned to the white title slide. The silence in the hall was no longer curiosity. It was a hush that felt like winter air. It was cold, sharp, and absolute. I saw Mrs. Gable put her hand over her mouth. I saw Mr. Kell the janitor, staring at the floor. I stood in that silence. I let it stretch, pressing down on everyone, a heavy, weighted blanket of truth. I am not here to use words like theft, I said, my voice low but clear in the microphone. That is not my job. I am here to use the words of an engineer. What this data shows is a severe and systemic misallocation of funds. It shows a critical conflict of interest, and most importantly, it shows a fundamental failure to show up for the people the foundation was chartered to serve. The room was frozen. I motioned to the side of the stage. I would now like to invite the foundation's legal counsel, Jasper Riddick, to speak for 1 minute on the legal mechanisms of the trust. Jasper stepped up to the podium, his posture immaculate. He did not look at the crowd. He looked at his wristwatch. "Good evening," he said, his dry voice cutting through the tension. "As stipulated in the Trust's charter, this is a mandatory transparency meeting. I am here to state, for the record, the legal remedies encoded by the founder, Eleanor Whitcomb." He spoke like he was reading a grocery list. "1. The interim steward, Ms. Ross, has full authority to freeze and recall any misallocated funds. 2. A 60-day restitution window for all named vendors and associated parties begins now. 3. The show-up provision is in full effect. Any primary beneficiary of the Associated Family Trust who is not physically present for this meeting forfeits all discretionary distributions, pending a full audit and restitution. All clauses are attendance triggered. My 45 seconds are up." He stepped back from the podium, leaving a vacuum. As he said the words, "attendance triggered," a new sound echoed from the back of the hall. Tap, tap, tap. It was not a gavel. It was a cane. The news camera, which had been focused on me, swiveled. The entire room turned. A great rustling of bodies, a sea of whispers. The main doors were open, and in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright light of the lobby, was Eleanor Whitcomb. She was not frail. She was iron. She wore a dark, perfectly tailored wool suit. Her cane tapped the floor not for balance, but for emphasis. She was late, deliberately, perfectly late. She walked slowly, inexorably, down the center aisle. The crowd parted for her like water. The only sound was the tapping of her cane and the soft, electronic clicks of dozens of cell phone cameras. The room was a field of mirrors, all rising, all reflecting her. She did not look at me. She did not look at the committee. She walked straight to the empty front row. I watched her. She passed the chair I had labeled Eleanor Whitcomb. She passed the empty chairs meant for Paula and Frank. She walked directly to the middle chair, the one I had labeled Community Seats, and sat down. She placed her cane carefully across her knees. She looked up at the stage. She found my eyes. She nodded. Once, a single, sharp acknowledgement. "Proceed." "Engineer." I took a shaky breath, but my voice was solid. "Thank you, Grandma. Thank you, Jasper. As this is a transparency meeting, I would now like to invite any party named in this dashboard to come forward and speak, to clarify the data, to correct the record. The floor is open." I looked at the hostile nod of committee members. They were staring at their laps, their faces pale. I looked at the empty seats in the front row, the ones where my parents should have been, the ones who were too exhausted to come, the ones who, by their absence, had just forfeited everything. A beat of silence, a second beat. The air was so tight it was hard to breathe. The only sound was the electronic hum of the projector. Paula and Frank did not walk in. They had made their choice. But then, the side door, the one near the stage, creaked open. It was not Paula. It was not Frank. It was Sabrina. She stumbled in, not gliding. Her posture was brittle, a puppet with its strings tangled. She was wearing oversized black sunglasses, indoors, at night. Her hair was perfect, her outfit expensive, but she looked like a broken doll. She must have received the legal notice from Riddick. She must have realized what was happening, what she was about to lose. She was 11 minutes late, but she was here. She had, in the final, desperate moment, shown up. She walked, hesitant, toward the front, and stopped in the aisle, trapped in the open space between the stage and her grandmother, who did not turn to look at her. Sabrina stood in the aisle, a statue carved from brittle panic. The sunglasses were a ridiculous, useless shield. Her breath was shallow. The local news camera, its red light a persistent, burning eye, swung from the podium, past Eleanor, and settled on her, the star, the sweetheart. She was trapped in the wrong spotlight, and she knew it. "The floor is open," I repeated, my voice even. I did not want her to run. I wanted her to speak. I wanted her to be recorded. I motioned to the second microphone, the one set up in the aisle for public comment. She walked toward it. Each step seemed to cost her something. Her high heels, usually silent and confident on a pageant stage, were loud, sharp, aggressive taps on the Civic Hall's wooden floor. She reached the microphone, and her hand, adorned with stacked rings from the gilded hanger, trembled as she gripped it. She pulled off the sunglasses. Her eyes were red-rimmed, swollen. The perfect makeup was cracking. "Hi," she said. Her voice, usually a bright, persuasive melody, was thin and reedy. "Hi, everyone. This is all just a terrible misunderstanding." She was trying to perform. She looked at the crowd, her gaze sweeping the faces, searching for the allies, the believers, the members of her fan club. "My sister," she said, her voice gaining a fraction of its old strength. "Madeline. She has always been very good with numbers, with computers. She's very practical. But she does not see the big picture. She does not understand how the real world works." She was building her defense. This was her stage. "These events," she gestured vaguely, "the galas, the networking, the parties, they are not a waste. They boost our town's image. They bring in more money in the long run. It is called brand building. You have to spend money to make money." The cluster of my mother's committee members nodded vigorously. This was the story they had been told. This was the narrative they had bought. And my mother, Sabrina's voice hitched. She placed her free hand on her chest, a gesture I had seen her practice in the mirror. My mother saved this foundation. After Grandma had her stroke, she worked day and night. She poured her soul into keeping it alive, into making it better. And this is how she is thanked by an audit, by her own daughter, trying to tear her down. She looked at me, her eyes wet with practiced tears. It is just cruel." I let her words hang in the air. I let the performance settle. I did not react. I did not defend myself. I was not the one on trial. "Thank you, Sabrina," I said, my voice crisp and amplified. It cut directly through her manufactured sympathy. "Thank you for clarifying your perspective on brand building. You mentioned spending money to make money. Let's look at that." I clicked the remote. The video of her vanished. The screen behind me changed to a new slide. It was not a complex algorithm. It was a simple, brutal line graph. "This is a comparative timeline of the last 18 months, I said. I picked up the laser pointer. The small red dot landed on the screen. The red line tracks the expenditures for the community morale and event services budgets. As you can see, it is a steep, upward trend. I moved the pointer to the second line, a pathetic, flat blue line that hugged the bottom axis. "And this blue line," I said, "tracks the budget for the St. Augustine's Pantry Fuel Voucher Program. As the red line, the brand building, goes up, the blue line, the food delivery, goes down." I clicked again. A new slide. "Let's look at this specific point. This spike here. A 50% increase in payments to the Gilded Hanger for promotional wardrobe correlates to the exact week that Omar Hassan's fuel vouchers were cut. Permanently." The room was silent. The moral calculus was clear. "So, yes," I said, "money was spent, but the data shows it was not made. It was moved. It was moved away from the fuel budget for the hungry and into the wardrobe budget for the brand. Sabrina's face, the one that sold boutique dresses and pageant tickets, went slack. The color drained from it, leaving a pale, blotchy mask under her foundation. "That cannot be right," she said, her voice rising, losing its composure. "I mean, I do not handle the books. I am not an accountant. My mother is a creative, not a numbers person. These are they are admin errors. You are twisting this. This is just paperwork." "Admin errors," I repeated. The phrase was clinical. $50,000 in round-trip transactions to a UPS store mailbox. Velvet cushions approved while a roof repair was denied. 60% of a fuel budget. That is a pattern. Sabrina, that is not an admin error. Before I could click to the final slide, a new voice cut through the tension. It was not mine. It was not Sabrina's. It was Eleanor's. She sat in the front row, in the community seats chair, perfectly still. She had not turned. She had not moved. She did not raise her voice. "Sabrina," she said, her voice, clear as gray water, carried across the hall. It was not a microphone voice. It was a voice of absolute authority. Sabrina froze. Her head snapped toward our grandmother. "Grandma." "The St. Augustine's Pantry," Eleanor said, "distributes food to the shut-ins every Thursday afternoon. I have been on that committee for 30 years. My attendance is in the minutes." She looked directly at her younger granddaughter, the star, the sweetheart. "Sabrina," Eleanor asked, "how many Thursday pantry shifts have you covered in the last 2 years?" It was the quiet knife. It was not about money. It was not about invoices. It was about presence. Sabrina opened her mouth. No sound came out. She looked at our mother's committee, her face a mask of naked panic, as if they could provide an alibi. They stared at their shoes. "I am very busy," Sabrina said, her voice thin. "My work, my brand, it is a full-time job. I support the community in other ways, with the brand." "The question was not about your job," Eleanor said, her voice like iron. "The question was, how many shifts did you show up for?" Sabrina just stood there. Her face, her entire carefully constructed identity, was collapsing. The sunglasses, which she still held in her trembling left hand, slipped and fell to the floor, clattering on the wood. From the back of the room, near the pantry volunteers, someone whispered, loud enough to be heard in the silence, "None." I let that word, "none," hang in the air, a final verdict. "This was not an admin error," I said, my voice pulling the focus, pulling the knife. I brought the room back to the screen. "It was a deliberate choice. It was a choice of brand over need." I clicked the remote. This was the final slide, the kill shot. "This," I said, "is the proof of that choice." The screen filled with an image of an email from Paula Carver gmail.com, sent to the owner of the Gilded Hanger. I had highlighted the key passage. The red dot of the laser pointer rested on it. I read my mother's words aloud, my voice flat, cold, and clear. "We cannot," I read, "use the foundation funds for entertainment or wardrobe directly. The auditors will not pass it. You must list all invoices for Sabrina's launch party and clothing under the Community Improvement and Outreach budget line. Call it civic branding. That is the only way I can approve the payment." A sound rippled through the hall. It was not a gasp. It was a murmur, a low, angry, collective groan. This was not a mistake. This was intent. This was conspiracy. This was the sound of the town. The Maple Ridge Moms Group, the committee, the donors, all deciding, at once, who they were. The narrative was broken. The spell was shattered. Before the murmur could become a shout, a new figure stood up. It was Mr. Kell, the janitor. His face was full of a deep, profound sadness. He walked slowly, his back stooped, to the aisle microphone. Sabrina was still frozen by her mic, a prisoner, unable to move. He did not look at her. He looked at me, at the stage. he said, and the room went silent to hear his soft, worn voice. I just want to say, we needed mops, desperately. We still need mops. The pantry floor is still wet. We did not need the velvet. He turned, nodded once, and walked back to his seat. That simple statement, we needed mops, not velvet, was the final moral calculus. It was the judgment of the entire town. Jasper Riddick stood up from his seat near the stage. He did not go to the podium. He spoke from where he stood, his voice, dry and precise, cutting through the heavy air. As legal counsel, he announced, I am required to state that the show-up provision is now, officially, activated. As of this moment, any primary beneficiary who failed to attend this meeting, namely Paula Carver and Frank Carver, has forfeited all discretionary distributions from all associated trusts. Pending the full restitution demanded by the interim steward, their absence is legally recorded. The word forfeited hit Sabrina like a physical blow. She understood that word. She looked wildly from Jasper, to Eleanor, to me. Her entire world, the family enterprise that had been funded by siphoned charity, had just evaporated. She turned. She did not walk. She ran. She ran, stumbling, up the side aisle toward the red exit sign. She did not pick up her sunglasses. The local news camera panned, following her, the red light unblinking. It captured her pushing the exit bar with her whole body. It captured her fleeing into the darkness of the parking lot. It captured the empty, waiting microphone stand she left behind. I stood at the podium. The room was silent, watching me. They had seen the data, the confrontation, and the collapse. I centered myself. I thought of the empty chair at my robotics final. I thought of the locked door in the thunderstorm. I thought of the pew. My grandmother, I said, my voice finding its final, steady point, has a phrase, love without presence is reputation. Tonight, the data shows us what that means. It means velvet over roofs. It means parties over pantry routes. It means reputation over community. I looked at the empty front row, at the place cards for my parents. I looked at the empty mic stand where my sister had been. This was never about family, I said. It was about fairness, because, in the end, fairness is just a calculation. It is an engineer's job, and attendance is love, measured in hours. The next morning, at 9 a.m., we convened. It was not the public civic hall. It was the formal Whitcomb Foundation conference room, on the top floor of the old bank building. The room was long, sunlit, and smelled of lemon oil and old expensive paper. The mahogany table was polished to a mirror sheen. The board members were there, the town council representative, the church deacon, the pantry board chair, Mrs. Gable. They sat silently, their faces sober in the bright morning light. And then there were the chairs. Jasper Riddick had placed them himself, 2 heavy empty seats on the far side of the table. In front of them, crisp, white, printed cards. Paula Carver, Frank Carver. Their absence was a final, signed confession. At the center of the table, where the board could see it, was my place card from the night before, the one I had left on the podium, reserved for who shows up. The single white tulip and the silver paperclip rested beside it. Eleanor sat at the head of the table, her cane leaning against the wood. She looked at the assembly, her gaze sweeping over the empty chairs without comment. She called the meeting to order with 4 words. We will remember who came. Jasper Riddick stood, his tweed jacket immaculate. He held a thin-bound document. This, he announced, his voice dry and precise, is an amendment of intent to the Whitcomb Living Trust, prepared by Ms. Whitcomb and held in escrow. It was activated by the fulfillment of the show-up provision at 7 p.m. last night. He began to read. His voice was a monotone, a surgical instrument detailing the disassembly of an empire. Effective immediately. Primary stewardship of the Whitcomb Foundation and all its assets passes from Eleanor Whitcomb to Madeline Ross. I heard Mrs. McGable take a sharp breath. Furthermore, Jasper continued, turning a page. All future discretionary distributions to the Carver Family Trust and its named beneficiaries are hereby converted. They are no longer automatic stipends. They are service-based grants. He paused, looking over his glasses. These grants are redeemable only by logged, verified volunteer hours at Foundation-approved charities, the pantry, the clinic, the shelter. A restitution plan is triggered, effective today, he read on. All funds tied to the vendor network, including Maple Ridge Event Services, LLC, and the Gilded Hanger, must be returned to the Foundation within 60 days. If they are not returned in that window, the outstanding balance will be converted into a restricted grant, controlled exclusively by Ms. Ross and earmarked for the pantry fuel and clinic transport funds. He was not just patching the leak, he was reversing the flow. Finally, Jasper said, Paula and Frank Carver's automatic stipends are terminated. They are replaced by attendance credits, hours logged at the pantry, clinic transport shifts, shelter shifts, no hours. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. No funds. The mechanism was beautiful. It was fair. It was perfectly engineered. Eleanor looked at the board members. We require a vote to ratify this amendment into the Foundation's charter. The town council rep, a woman who had looked at me with suspicion last night, now looked at me with resolved clarity. I vote yes. The church deacon, Mr. Kell's superior, nodded. We need mops. I vote yes. Mrs. Gable, from the pantry board, looked at me, her eyes shining. God help us. Yes. The motion passes, Eleanor said. She took a heavy black fountain pen from her purse. She uncapped it. The scratch of the nib on the heavy paper was the only sound in the sunlit room. She signed her name. She capped the pen. She slid the document across the polished table to me. She did not smile. She looked at me. The engineer. Tables aren't inherited, Madeline, she said, her voice low. They're built. You just built a new one. One last piece of business, Jasper said, sliding a small, sealed envelope across the table. It was the same cream-colored cardstock as the note on the pew. It was labeled, in Eleanor's sharp cursive, Note 2. I looked at Eleanor. She nodded once. I broke the seal. It was not a note. It was a formal offer letter, printed on Brightline Health Systems letterhead. It was a matching grant. They had been a silent partner, watching my academic work for months. Impressed by my predictive modeling and commitment to systemic transparency, they were offering to fully fund the Maple Ridge Rural Clinic for 2 years, a massive, transformative grant. But there was a condition, a final test. The grant was contingent on me, Madeline Ross, personally accepting a 12-month contract to lead the transparency pilot, to build the supply chain dashboard for them. Here, my escape route, my out. It had never been an escape. It was an interview for the real job. They were not offering me a ladder to climb out. They were offering me the tools to rebuild the foundation. I looked up from the letter. Eleanor was watching me, her eyes knowing. The board was watching me. I thought of the lumpy motel bed. I thought of the leaky roof. I thought of the empty fuel cans. I did not need to escape. I needed to build. I folded the letter and placed it on the table. I'll show up, I said. The meeting was over. The empty chairs, labeled Paula Carver and Frank Carver, remained empty. The signatures on the amendment were dry. In the corner of the ceiling, the small red light on the security camera, the one recording the meeting for the official minutes, went dark. Eleanor leaned in across the table. The other board members were rising, gathering their papers, speaking in hushed, respectful tones. Her voice was a whisper, meant only for me. You slept on a pew, meant for the poor, paid for by theft, she said. Consider this pew your proof. I reached into my pocket. I took out the heavy brass key from Unit 12C, the key that had opened the vault of records. I slid it back across the polished mahogany table. It was no longer needed. I had the keys to the real machine now. The story does not end in that room. It cuts to the exact turning point. I stood up from the boardroom table. I walked out of the sunlit conference room and into the main hall of the Civic Center. The scent of lemon oil was gone, replaced by the smell of fresh coffee and Mrs. Gable's oatmeal cookies. Volunteers were already there, dozens of them. Omar was there, with his drivers. Mr. Kell was there, holding a clipboard. They were clustered around a long folding table, the one that had been used for the cookies. They were signing up for pantry shifts, signing up for clinic transport, signing up for the roof repair committee. On a large monitor mounted to the wall, my dashboard was glowing. It was the new, live, public version. The community morale module was gone. In its place, the pantry fuel icon was already a full, bright red. I watched as Mrs. Gable walked over to the podium where I had stood. She picked up my folded place card, the one with the white tulip and the silver paperclip, reserved for who shows up. She carried it over to the volunteer sign-up. She moved it from the podium onto that long table, a table already crowded, a table with many, many chairs. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below to say hello and share your thoughts. Please subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories. Like this video, and if you can, support us by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.